I've been getting a lot of questions lately about why there's two different growth regulator displays in GreenKeeper. And so I wanted to take a second to really kind of get back to basics and give a little excerpt from my GreenKeeper University course, Programming PGR Applications, to kind of explain where do growing degree day intervals come from, where do they fit in scheduling, and why is there this other display that tells us the PGRs are lasting longer than they are. So let's dive into a couple slides from my PGR course just to help with understanding. So when you put down a growth regulator, there's a couple things that we see. So this is growing degree days after we applied the, in this case, trim it at either the low rate or the high label rate, 5.5 or 16 ounces per acre on a bentgrass green. And so just focus on the two green lines now. The light green line shows the growth response if we did the low rate. The dark green line shows the growth response if you have the high rate. So the things you may have heard me say before is that application rate doesn't have too much of an impact on how long the PGRs last, but has more of an impact on how much suppression we get. And we see that clearly here, where we have the low rates giving us about a 30% suppression. The high rate is giving us 50% suppression. So now the question is, when do we reapply these products? And this is, I think, where people are getting hung up. We actually tend to reapply the product just after peak suppression, because at this point, the PGR levels are so low in the plant that the plant starts to resume normal growth. And so if we waited all the way until the growth suppression phase stopped, we would get a little rebound and then we'd go back into suppression. So we have to be early, and that's where the confusion is coming in, like a GreenKeeper display. When it shows when to reapply the PGRs, that is telling us this point, that point to reapply to maintain suppression. And it's really only designed for single active ingredients. When you start mixing PGRs, then it becomes a little bit more complicated. And I'll talk about that in a second. But then you can really see here why the application rate didn't have too much of an impact on when to reapply, because the low label rate, when we go 30% past here, we're getting a value of like 260. And then at the high rate, it just shifted it over slightly. Peak suppression only happened a little bit later with that higher rate. So therefore, we have to reapply it at roughly the same amount of time, maybe a day longer for 3 times the amount of product being applied. So that's one of the confusing factors. We can't wait until the suppression's gone. But when we reapply, what's happening is we are still getting some suppression from the past application, in addition to some suppression from the most current application. So one is kind of waning and the other one is gaining. And so the net result is even suppression. Even that, there sometimes are some discrepancies in when we need to reapply based on how active the grass wants to grow. If it is growing very, very quickly, when the temperatures are really ideal, then we get those big rebound phases that I showed in that last slide. Where in this scenario, we have some grass that was sampled at Texas Tech with Dr. Joey Young, and he was showing that under those high heat conditions, we didn't see as much of a rebound. We also see that in Nebraska, and we think it's probably because there's not a buildup of sugar metabolites and these gibberellin hormone precursors to supply this big growth surge. And so in this example, we see that our reapplication interval is generally about the same, but actually we might be able to lengthen it just a little bit. And so this is something that we're building into the GreenKeeper models to account for this presence or absence of a rebound phase. And so in this example, none of the PGRs really supplied any kind of a rebound. And so we've seen this with all the PGRs, sometimes they give a rebound, sometimes they don't. And a lot of that has to do with what state is the turfgrass in when it enters into that rebound phase. So this is the confusing part in GreenKeeper. You look here, this is at my Jim Agard Memorial Golf Course, the golf course that I take care of. And we can see that I applied trim it and a new today. And so we have 0 growing degree days are started for that. And then I was late today because we aerated yesterday, or we needle tined. So I went out today to replace this anew and the trim it. And so in this view, it shows it's expired. But look, it still says suppression is 25%. So then in this cumulative suppression div, we call it, you see those two applications are there, and they're red, showing, yeah, we're still getting a significant amount of suppression from those past apps, and we're not getting anything from the new applications because they just got applied today. And so this is how this system kind of works, where one application is coming on as the other application is coming off, and as we get those timings right with a growing degree day approach, then we're able to maintain even suppression. If we apply too frequently, then we have more PGR coming on, maybe before the other PGR, the past application, is dwindling away. And so then we get more suppression. And so that's why this view is here. Even though you might close this anew and trim it because you don't need to think about it anymore, they're still having an impact on your growth rate. And that's why it's displayed in this view below. So finally, the view that I'm working on building with our development team right now for this summer is this new approach to visualizing what these PGRs are doing in terms of a stacking effect. And so we have like this is an example again from my Jim Egger golf course, where we can see I applied a new in blue, trim it would show it would be in orange, banner max would be green. And so I just threw that one in there just to kind of show what a DMI effect would look like too. And so then the purple line is that cumulative effect. So you can see I went to apply my new and my trim it today. You can see what would happen over the next 10 days with the weather if I didn't apply anything. We notice that it's rapidly declining because the new and the trim it applications are gone, and I was relying only on that banner max application. So when I went out today to make my application, I kind of thought about that and said, well, how much suppression do I need? Well, I got a lot of growth suppression right now, so I actually dialed my PGR rates back, so I'm getting less suppression. And then doing so, that then makes this line in the future projected to kind of look more like this, which is where I want it. Closer to 50% suppression, I think, on my greens is appropriate. And that's up to you as what you think you need. So I'm really excited to kind of bring this view into GreenKeeper the next couple weeks, and I think this is really going to help people understand how all their PGRs and DMI fungicides are helping to influence their growth rate. And we can then take that cumulative clipping yield suppression, which is derived from a kind of an algorithm that looks at all these individually and groups them and figures out what's the suppression each day. And then we can apply it to our clipping volume. So in this example, if I'm getting 60% suppression, and I'm measuring 1 quart or 1 liter of clippings per 1,000 square feet or 100 square meters. If I didn't have that, I'd be getting over 2.5, right? And that's what this display is kind of showing. Like how is the PGR having an impact on what my growth rate is and what it would have been if I wasn't on my PGR program. So I hope that this helps. Again, this is part of a whole course that I teach, 10 hours of recordings, 10 lectures about everything growth regulators. They're all self-paced. There's quizzes every couple videos. They're not graded. It's just there to test your understanding, make sure you understand the big concepts. And they include everything on scheduling PGRs, how PGRs influence green speed, how does reducing growth rate influence sugar and nutrient requirements, and then how do all those things influence secondary benefits? Like, what about annual bluegrass control? What about roots and density and color and quality? And all those types of questions are covered in this course. So if you want to learn more, you can obviously always go to greenkeeperapp.com, or you can go to our URL, learnturf.com, and then click under the Advanced Courses tab to view all of the, I think, 14 or 15 advanced courses that we have taught. And you can still enroll in those now this summer. So if you're having some questions this year and you need kind of a refresher, you can enroll, and we can help you get up to speed as to how those PGRs are working. So if you have any questions at all, this is a great resource for you for growth regulators. I hope this clarified why there's this whole display of growing degree day models and intervals versus the cumulative amount of suppression that we see in GreenKeeper, and you can start to have a better understanding of how all of those things are working together to influence the growth rate at your golf course.